Imagine this. A mother and her young daughter set out for what should have been a simple camping trip in the vast, rugged desert of Texas. They were seeking adventure, fresh air, and a chance to connect with nature. But something went terribly wrong. The two never returned home, leaving behind unanswered questions that haunted their family for over a decade. Then, 11 years later, a discovery changes everything. A son finds his mother's truck, buried deep in a remote ravine. What happened to them? And why is their vehicle hidden so far from where they were last seen? This is a story about loss, hope, and the relentless pursuit of truth. It's also a story about how far we'll go for the people we love. Let me introduce you to Elijah Mercer, or Eli, as everyone calls him. He's not your typical hero. He's just an ordinary guy who has spent half his life searching for answers. 11 years ago, when Eli was just 15, his mum took his little sister, Celine, camping in the Presidio County desert. At the time, Eli thought camping sounded boring, compared to staying with his grandparents and playing video games. So, he stayed behind while his mom and sister ventured into the wild. That decision would haunt him for years to come, because after that weekend, Jessica Mercer and her 4-year-old daughter vanished without a trace. No phone calls, no messages, just silence. The search efforts back then were massive. Police helicopters scoured the skies. Volunteers combed the desert on foot, and flyers plastered every bulletin board in town. But no matter how hard they looked, there was no sign of them. Over time, the case grew cold. People moved on with their lives, but Eli couldn't. His grandfather, who had once been a surveyor for the state of Texas, poured all his knowledge of the desert into helping find his daughter and granddaughter. Together, they mapped out areas to search, retraced potential routes, and followed every lead. But even after his grandfather passed away, Eli refused to give up. For him, it wasn't just about finding closure. It was about bringing his family back together. Fast forward to today, and Eli is still searching, armed with a metal detector, a backpack full of supplies, and sheer determination. He spends his weekends trekking through the unforgiving terrain of the Big Bend region. His best friend Trent Wilson often tags along, though Trent admits he'd rather be anywhere else. "You're obsessed," Trent tells him one blistering afternoon as they trudge across the cracked earth. But obsession is what keeps Eli going. He knows the odds are against him, but he also knows that somewhere out there lies the key to unlocking the mystery of his mother and sister's disappearance. And then it happens. After 11 long years, Eli spots something glinting at the bottom of a steep ravine. At first, he thinks it might be nothing more than a piece of scrap metal. But as he inches closer, his heart skips a beat. It's a truck, an upside-down, rusted-out shell of a vehicle, but unmistakably his mother's. On the side panel is a sticker shaped like mountain peaks, the same one she proudly slapped on the door before heading out on that fateful trip. Eli's hands shake as he takes it all in. This isn't just a random discovery. It's proof that his mother and sister were here. But what does it mean? Why is the truck in such a remote location? And most importantly, where are they now? As news of the discovery spreads, the small Texas town of Alpine buzzes with renewed interest in the case. Detective Russ Sawyer, a seasoned investigator, steps in to coordinate the recovery operation. Forensic teams carefully extract the truck from the ravine, revealing clues that suggest foul play. Inside the vehicle, they find a melted drone case, wedged under the passenger seat. It's empty, but tucked inside is a micro SD card containing footage from the day Jessica and Celine disappeared. The videos show happy moments, mother and daughter laughing, exploring the desert, capturing panoramic views of the horizon. But the final clip hints at something ominous. In the distance, landmarks visible in the drone footage don't match the area where the truck was found. Someone moved it, and likely did so years after the fact. Eli becomes laser-focused on piecing together the puzzle. He notices something strange in one of the panoramic shots, a jagged ridgeline that doesn't appear on any public maps. Digging deeper, he uncovers an old military testing ground, marked on his grandfather's topographic maps. Could this abandoned facility hold the answers he's been searching for? Despite warnings from Detective Sawyer, Eli convinces Trent and a young officer named Ryan to investigate. What they find there raises more questions than answers. The site appears deserted, but signs of recent activity hint at something sinister lurking beneath the surface. But the real twist comes when Eli and Trent are ambushed at a lonely gas station on the edge of the desert. Beaten and taken hostage, Eli wakes up in a dimly lit bar, surrounded by dangerous men. Their leader accuses Eli of trespassing, but there's something else. He seems oddly protective of a blonde woman who occasionally slips in and out of view. When Eli finally gets a good look at her, his blood runs cold. She looks eerily familiar, like someone he hasn't seen since childhood. Could it really be Celine, alive after all these years? If so, who are these men, and why have they kept her hidden for over a decade? As tensions rise, Eli faces an impossible choice. The gang offers him a deal: walk away, and they'll release both Celine and his friend Trent. But Eli knows better than to trust them. These aren't just ordinary criminals. They're part of something bigger, something tied to the secrets of the desert itself. And as the sun sets over the barren landscape, the standoff escalates into chaos. Gunfire erupts, alliances shift, and Eli must fight not only for his own survival, but for the chance to bring his sister home. This is where I'll leave you hanging, for now, because the story doesn't end here. It's a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the lengths we'll go to protect the ones we love. But it's also a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought against others, they're fought within ourselves. So stay tuned for the next chapter, where we dive deeper into the heart-pounding climax of Eli's quest. You won't want to miss it. The moment Eli saw the truck, his world shifted. For 11 years, he had clung to the hope that his mother and sister were still out there, waiting to be found. But now, staring at the rusted, battered vehicle perched precariously in the ravine, a new reality began to sink in. This wasn't an accident. Someone had moved the truck here. Someone who didn't want it discovered. As Eli stood there, gripping the edge of the cliff with white-knuckled hands, questions swirled in his mind like the desert winds. Who would do this? Why? And most importantly, where were his mother and sister? Detective Sawyer's voice broke through Eli's thoughts. "We need to move fast," he said, already barking orders into his radio. The forensic team swarmed around the truck, their movements precise and methodical. Cameras flashed as they documented every detail: the warped metal, the faded mountain sticker, the melted drone case wedged under the seat. It was Trent who noticed the micro SD card hidden inside, a tiny fragment of evidence that held the potential to unravel the mystery. When the first video played on the laptop screen, showing Jessica Mercer smiling into the camera, with little Celine giggling beside her, Eli felt a lump rise in his throat. These were the last moments of happiness before everything went wrong. They went camping but never returned. 11 years later, Sun finds their truck in desert. Back at the command tent, Eli pored over the footage again and again, searching for clues. The final panoramic shot caught his attention. a jagged ridgeline that didn't match any public maps. Consulting his grandfather's old topographics charts, Eli identified the area as an abandoned military testing ground. His heart raced. What if whoever took his family was using the facility? What if they were still there? Detective Sawyer cautioned against jumping to conclusions, but Eli couldn't ignore the connection. He convinced Trent and Officer Ryan to join him for a quick reconnaissance mission, hoping to gather enough evidence to convince the detective to expand the search perimeter. The drive to the military site was tense. The makeshift trail leading to the facility showed signs of recent use: flattened vegetation, fresh tire tracks. But when they arrived, the place seemed deserted. Broken windows, collapsed roofs, and scattered debris painted a picture of abandonment. Yet something about the scene unsettled Eli. As they surveyed the area, he spotted a familiar object: his mother's drone controller sitting on a high shelf inside the bar. Beside it hung a photograph of men loading crates into trucks near the same facility. These weren't just poachers or opportunistic thieves. They were part of something bigger, something dangerous. Before they could leave, chaos erupted. A group of armed men surrounded them, dragging Eli and Trent into the bar, while Ryan managed to slip away unnoticed. Inside, Eli faced the gang leader, a man whose calm demeanor masked a calculating brutality. "You should have let the police close the case," the leader sneered. "Your mother and sister are dead, buried somewhere in this desert, and soon you'll join them." But then Eli saw her, the blonde woman who occasionally slipped in and out of view. She looked older, hardened by years of survival, but there was no mistaking those eyes. They belonged to Celine. When the leader left the room, Celine entered. Cautiously, her expression conflicted. "I don't remember much from before," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I dream about a woman with blonde hair who called me Celine." Eli's heart ached as he realized how deeply her memories had been buried. He told her about their childhood, about the camping trips and the flying camera she used to love. For a fleeting moment, recognition flickered in her eyes. "I want to believe you," she said finally. "But these people, they've never hurt me. The boss protected me." Eli pleaded with her to escape together, but Celine hesitated. Loyalty to the gang warred with the faint stirrings of her true identity. Before she could decide, shouts echoed outside. The boss returned, furious that Celine had helped Eli untie himself. "You're coming with us," he growled, seizing her arm. Eli lunged forward, but a gun pointed at his chest stopped him cold. The standoff grew more volatile as sirens wailed in the distance. Somehow, the police had tracked them down. As officers surrounded the compound, the situation spiraled out of control. Gunfire erupted, shattering bottles behind the bar, where Eli pulled Celine to safety. Through the chaos, he shouted at her, reminding her of who she really was. Tears streamed down her face as she processed the truth. In a moment of clarity and desperation, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a knife, and plunged it into the boss's side. Chaos exploded around them as bullets flew, but Eli shielded Celine with his body, refusing to let go even as the world crumbled around them. When the gunfire ceased, paramedics rushed in to tend to the wounded. Officers secured the surviving gang members, including the bleeding boss, being loaded onto a stretcher. Outside, Trent sat in a police car, battered but alive, holding up a small tracker device. "Jenny gave it to me," he explained with a weak grin. "Said she was tired of me getting lost in the desert." Eli laughed despite himself, relief washing over him like a wave. But the moment was short-lived. Detective Sawyer approached, his expression grim, yet determined. We need to secure that military facility, Sawyer said, turning to his team. If what Celine told us is true, we can't risk anyone clearing it out. Celine stepped forward, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. They've been using it for years, she said. Weapons, smuggling operations. It's all there. Her words carried weight, not just as a victim, but as someone who had lived among the criminals. Eli watched her closely, marveling at the strength she summoned, despite everything she'd endured. As they prepared to leave, Celine paused, looking back at the bar that had been her home for so long. What happens to me now? She asked quietly. Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You come home, he said simply, where you belong. But Sawyer's cautionary tone reminded them both that reintegration wouldn't be easy. Legal proceedings, statements, court appearances, all lay ahead. Still, Eli vowed to stand by her side every step of the way. One day at a time, he promised. Echoing her earlier words, the ride back to Alpine felt surreal. Celine gazed out the window, taking in the vast expanse of the desert that had shaped her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. Eli recounted stories of their mother and grandfather, filling the silence with fragments of a past she barely remembered. For the first time in years, hope flickered within her, a fragile, tentative thing, but real nonetheless. Yet as they neared town, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them. Questions lingered unanswered. Who else was involved in the gang's operations? How far-reaching was their network? And what secrets still hid in the shadows of the desert? The answers would come in time, but for now, Eli and Celine focused on one truth. They had each other. Together, they would face whatever came next, one day at a time. As the police car pulled into the station parking lot in Alpine, the reality of everything that had happened began to sink in for both Eli and Celine. The flashing lights of patrol, cars, and the murmurs of officers coordinating next steps created a surreal atmosphere. For 11 years, Eli had imagined this moment, finding his sister, bringing her home. But now that it was here, he realized how complicated home really was. Celine sat quietly beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked overwhelmed but resolute, as if she were trying to process not just the events of the day, but an entire lifetime of questions. Detective Sawyer approached them. Once they stepped out of the vehicle, his expression softened when he addressed. Celine, you're safe now, he said gently. But there's still work to do. We need your help to shut down their operation completely. Celine nodded, though her eyes betrayed uncertainty. Eli placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll get through this together, he promised. It wasn't just words. It was a vow he intended to keep, no matter what came next. Inside the station, Celine recounted everything she knew about the gang's activities. The weapons smuggling, the raids on tourists, the hidden routes leading to the old military facility. Her voice trembled at times, especially when describing how the boss had manipulated her loyalty over the years. But with each detail, she grew stronger, more determined to break free from the life she'd been forced into. Detective Sawyer listened, intently, jotting notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. By the end of her statement, tears streaked her face, but there was a newfound clarity in her gaze. She was reclaiming her identity, piece by painful piece. Meanwhile, Eli couldn't stop thinking about their mother. He wondered if she'd somehow known, during those last moments, that her son would never give up searching for her daughter. The thought brought both comfort and anguish. He excused himself briefly to call Trent, who was already back at the garage fixing up his beloved Jeep. "How's my baby doing?" Trent joked when he answered, But his tone turned serious when Eli asked about Jenny. "She's been worried. I'd sick," Trent admitted. "You should call her." That night, after hours of statements and planning sessions, Eli finally sat alone with Celine in a quiet corner of the station. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under a starlit sky. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" Celine asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Eli hesitated, then smiled softly. "She'd be proud of us," he corrected. "You survived something unimaginable. You held on to hope, even when you didn't realize it. And now you're brave, enough to start over." The next morning, a tactical team led by Detective Sawyer moved in on the abandoned military testing ground. Using intel provided by Celine, they discovered stockpiles of illegal weapons, crates of stolen goods, and evidence linking the gang to multiple crimes across state lines. The facility was secured, its secrets exposed, and the network dismantled. News outlets buzzed with updates about the bust, crediting the Mercer family's persistence for reopening a case long thought cold. Back in Alpine, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm for Eli and Celine. They rented a small house near the edge of town, close enough to see the desert horizon from their backyard. It was symbolic, a reminder of where they'd come from, but also a testament to how far they'd come. Celine started attending therapy sessions, working through the trauma of her past, while learning to navigate the complexities of adolescence she'd missed. Eli enrolled in community college, pursuing courses in criminal justice. He wanted to understand the system better, not just as a victim, but as someone who could make a difference. One evening, several months later, Jenny invited them over for dinner. Trent, ever the proud brother, couldn't resist teasing Eli about how much effort he'd put into dressing up. "Look at you," Trent said, grinning. "Who knew searching the desert for 11 years would land you such a catch?" Jenny rolled her eyes but smiled warmly at Eli. Over homemade lasagna and laughter, Eli felt a sense of normalcy he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that happiness wasn't just possible. It was within reach. As weeks turned into months, Celine began to rediscover parts of herself she'd forgotten. She took up photography, capturing the stark beauty of the desert landscapes she'd once feared. One photo, in particular, stood out. A panoramic shot of the Chainati Mountains, the jagged ridgelines bathed in golden light. When she showed it to Eli, he recognized it immediately. "That's the same ridge Mom used to talk about," he said softly. "She always said it reminded her of Grandpa's stories." Celine framed the photo and placed it on the mantel above the fireplace. Alongside pictures of their mother and grandfather, it became a symbol of closure. Not just for her, but for the entire family. Though their mother was gone, her legacy lived on in the bond between her children. Together, they honored her memory by embracing the future, one day at a time. In the end, the story of Jessica and Celine Mercer wasn't just about loss or survival. It was about resilience, about finding light in the darkest places, and holding on to hope, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. As Eli stood on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he realized something important. The desert hadn't taken everything from them. It had given them strength, perspective, and ultimately a second chance. And for that, he was grateful.